A veteran saved an elderly woman with his dog. What she gave him on Christmas will melt your heart. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was a cold winter evening, and the snow was falling gently over the small town of Pinebrook. The streets were quiet, almost eerily still, except for the crunch of footsteps in the snow. James, a 45-year-old veteran, was walking down the empty road with his loyal dog, Max, by his side. He had been struggling to adjust to civilian life after leaving the military. For years, he had lived in the shadows of his past, carrying the weight of memories he couldn't shake. Max, his faithful German shepherd, had been with him through thick and thin, and together, they made their way through life, one day at a time. As James walked, his mind wandered, reflecting on the battles he had fought in, both on the front lines and within himself. He wasn't sure what he was searching for, but the quiet of the town, covered in snow, brought him a strange sense of peace. Suddenly, Max stopped and began to bark, his fur bristling as he sniffed the air. James glanced down at his dog, sensing that something was wrong. Without hesitation, he followed Max as the dog darted off toward a small house at the corner of the street. There, on the porch, was a frail, elderly woman struggling to keep her balance. The wind was picking up, and snow was blowing fiercely around her, making it difficult to see clearly. She was trying to secure the shutters on her house, but with the heavy snowstorm, the task was proving too much for her. The old woman, her silver hair blowing in the wind, seemed unaware of the danger she was in. James rushed forward, calling out to her, "Ma'am, you need to get inside. It's too dangerous out here." But before he could reach her, a loud crack echoed. Through the air, a massive pine tree, weighed down by the snow, fell, crashing toward the porch. James dove forward, tackling the woman out of the way just in time, but the tree still grazed his arm as it fell. The woman gasped, her eyes wide with fear, but James quickly stood and helped her to her feet. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough with worry. She nodded, still shaking from the close call. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along," she said, her voice trembling. James smiled softly, feeling a sense of pride, just doing what anyone would have done. But as he helped her inside the house and made sure she was settled, he realized that this was no ordinary encounter. The woman, whose name was Helen, seemed familiar in a way he couldn't quite place. She was warm, kind, and had an aura of wisdom about her that made James feel at ease, even in his own storm of emotions. As the storm raged outside, they sat by the fire, and Helen made them both a cup of tea. James didn't know it yet, but this simple act of kindness would change everything for him, setting him on a path that would lead to a Christmas miracle that would touch his heart in ways he never expected. I can still remember the night I first met Helen. After I got her inside and we made sure she was safe, I sat down beside her by the fireplace. The storm outside was howling, but inside, the warmth from the fire filled the small room with comfort. As we sat there in the silence, she began to speak softly, her voice carrying a calmness that made me feel at ease. It was strange. She seemed to have a way of making everything feel okay, even in the midst of chaos. "You're a good man," she said, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames. Not many would have risked their own safety to help a stranger. I chuckled softly, rubbing my hand across my face. "I've been through a lot, but helping others has always been second nature. Guess it's the way I was raised." Helen nodded slowly, her gaze thoughtful. "I can tell. There's a kindness about you, even in the roughest of times." For a moment, I thought about what she said. It had been years since I felt like I had a purpose. After the war, everything had felt empty. Sure, I did odd jobs here and there, but it wasn't the same. There was something about this place, about her, that made me feel like I belonged. I couldn't explain it, but in that moment, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Helen made us both some hot tea, and we sat together by the fire, talking about life, about the small town of Pinebrook, and about how things had changed over the years. I could tell she'd seen a lot in her time. The wrinkles on her face spoke of many stories, of joys and sorrows that had shaped her into the woman she was today. She spoke of her late husband, Arthur, who had built the small bakery she now ran. He was always so full of life, she said with a wistful smile. We'd spend hours baking together, and those were the happiest days of my life. Her eyes grew distant for a moment, but she quickly shook her head and smiled again. Anyway, now I bake for myself, and for those who come by. It's been a good life. There was something about the way she spoke, something humble but profound. I realized then how much I had been missing. My life had been so focused on survival, on getting through the day, that I had forgotten how to appreciate the simple things. The warmth of a fire, the taste of a good meal, the company of a kind person. It was all so easy to overlook. As the night wore on, the storm outside began to ease, and the first rays of dawn crept through the window. I stood up to leave, ready to head back to my small cabin, but Helen stopped me. "Stay for Christmas," she said with a gentle smile. "It's just you and me here, and I'd love for you to be my guest." I was taken aback. Christmas had never meant much to me. After everything I'd been through, the holiday season always felt like a reminder of the things I had lost. But there was something about her invitation, the kindness in her eyes, that made me hesitate. "I'd be honored," I said, surprised by my own words. Over the next few days, I stayed with Helen, helping her around the bakery. She showed me the ropes, and I quickly found that I enjoyed the work. There was something peaceful about the rhythm of baking, about the way the dough rose, about the way the sweet smell of fresh bread filled the air. It was simple, honest work, and it felt good. Christmas Eve arrived, and the town gathered at Helen's bakery for a small celebration. The room was filled with laughter and joy as the townspeople exchanged gifts and stories. Helen had invited me to join in, and though I wasn't one for big gatherings, I couldn't help but feel a warmth inside. This was a kind of family, a place where I could finally feel at home. As the night drew to a close, Helen pulled me aside. "I have something for you," she said with a twinkle in her eye. She reached under the counter and pulled out a small, wrapped box. "It's not much," she said, "but I want you to have it. You've given me more than you'll ever know, just by being here." I was speechless as I took the box from her hands. I wasn't expecting anything, especially not from someone who had so little. But when I opened the box, I found a small key, an old-fashioned brass key that seemed to glow with some kind of unspoken meaning. "This is for the house on the hill," Helen explained softly. "Arthur and I always meant to open it up to someone who needed it. I think it's time." The key was a symbol, a gift that would change everything for me. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a door to a new beginning, a chance to start over, to build something meaningful once again. Helen's words echoed in my mind. "You've given me more than you'll ever know." That Christmas, I received more than just a key. I received a second chance at life, and it was something I would never take for granted. I had no idea what that key would unlock, not just physically, but emotionally. That Christmas Eve, when Helen handed me the small brass key, it felt like she was giving me the permission to hope again. I hadn't felt hope in so long, not since before the war. But as I stood there in the warm glow of her bakery, surrounded by people who treated me like I mattered, something inside of me started to shift. The days after Christmas passed quickly. I spent my time helping Helen with the bakery, learning the art of baking that she had perfected over the years. The work was hard but satisfying. There was something calming about the rhythm of mixing dough and kneading it until it was just right. Helen would always hum softly to herself as she worked, and I found myself joining in the quiet song. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. I wasn't just existing, I was living. A few days later, on a cold afternoon, I decided to take a walk up the hill to the house Helen had mentioned. The snow had melted slightly, leaving the ground damp and soft beneath my boots. Max, my dog, trotted beside me, his paws sinking into the earth as we made our way up the familiar trail. The house was at the top of the hill, just beyond the edge of the woods, hidden from the town below. As I approached, I could see that it was old, but there was something special about it. The wooden beams had a warmth to them, and the windows, though a little dusty, still had a certain charm. It looked like a place waiting to be loved again. I stood there for a moment, just looking at it. There was a feeling of peace here, something I hadn't expected. It was almost as if the house had been waiting for me, too. I unlocked the door with the brass key, and as I stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and old books. The house was empty, but in a way, it it felt full. Full of memories, full of potential. It was just like me, scarred but still standing, still capable of something good. I spent the next few days cleaning and making small repairs. The house needed work, but I didn't mind. With every brush of dust, every nail I hammered, I felt a sense of purpose return to my life. This place wasn't just a house. It was a chance for me to build something of my own. Something that wasn't defined by my past. Helen stopped by a few times to check on me, bringing over homemade bread and some of her famous apple pie. "You're doing great," she said one afternoon as she watched me repair a broken window. "I can see it in your eyes. This place is going to be something special." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. Helen had a way of making everything feel possible. One evening, after a long day of work, I sat on the front porch, watching the sun set over the town. Max lay beside me, his head resting on his paws. I thought about everything that had led me here. The war, the struggles, the loneliness. But now, it all felt like it was in the past. The key that Helen had given me wasn't just for the house. It was the key to my future. A future that was full of possibility. A future that I was ready to embrace. That night, I couldn't help but think back to that first day I met Helen. She had been a stranger, but now she was someone who had given me a gift I never could have imagined. A second chance. The next morning, I went into town to gather some supplies. As I passed the bakery, I saw Helen standing outside, greeting customers. She waved when she saw me, and I walked over to her. "How's the house?" she asked with a knowing smile. "It's perfect," I replied. "I'm finally starting to feel at home." She nodded, as if she already knew. "I'm glad to hear that, James," she said gently. "Sometimes, it takes a little bit of time to realize where we belong. But when we do, everything changes." I couldn't agree more. In that moment, I realized that this was my new beginning. Not just in the house on the hill, but in my life. I had found something that I had lost long ago, a sense of belonging, a place where I could rebuild and start over. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid. I had Helen's gift to thank for that, and I knew, deep down, that I would never take it for granted. I spent the next few months in the house on the hill, slowly making it my own. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the window, the light filtering through the trees that surrounded the property. It was peaceful here, in a way that I hadn't experienced in years. Max, my loyal dog, would trot along beside me as I tended to the small tasks around the house. The days were long but fulfilling, and as time passed, I began to feel like I was finally leaving the past behind. The bakery in town had become a second home to me as well. Helen was always there, welcoming the townspeople with her warm smile and delicious pastries. She never asked for anything in return for her kindness, but she gave me something invaluable: hope. One cold morning, as the first signs of winter began to settle in, I found myself walking down the hill toward Pinebrook. The town was as quiet as ever, the streets covered in a light dusting of snow. I made my way to the bakery, where Helen was busy in the kitchen. She was kneading dough when I walked in, the scent of freshly baked bread filling the air. "Good morning, James," she called, not looking up from her work. "Morning, Helen," I replied, taking a seat at the counter. "I was just thinking about how much this place feels like home." She smiled, her eyes twinkling. "I'm glad to hear that. You've been working so hard on the house. It's nice to see you finding your place in the world." I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through me. It had been a long time since I felt like I belonged anywhere. But here, in this small town with its friendly people and simple life, I was starting to feel whole again. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day," I told her, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "About finding where we belong. I think I'm finally getting it." Helen set the dough aside and came over to sit across from me. "Sometimes, we need to go through a lot of hardship to understand what we're meant for," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You've been through more than most people ever will. But you've come out the other side stronger, and that's something to be proud of." Her words struck a chord with me. It wasn't just the house or the bakery that had given me a fresh start. It was the kindness of people like Helen that had shown me how to find my way again. I didn't need a grand gesture or a life-changing event to move forward. All I needed was a little faith and the understanding that I was worthy of a second chance. As the days turned into weeks, I settled more into the rhythm of life in Pinebrook. I worked on the house when I could, making small improvements, and spent the rest of my time at the bakery with Helen. We became close friends, and as the winter holidays approached, I found myself looking forward to the season in a way I hadn't in years. Christmas was always a difficult time for me. The memories of my time in the military and the losses I'd experienced made it hard to celebrate. But this year felt different. There was something about the warmth of the town, the kindness of Helen, and the peace I had found in the house on the hill that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, Christmas could be something to look forward to again. A few days before Christmas, Helen called me to the bakery. "I have something for you," she said, her voice full of excitement. "It's not much, but I think you'll like it." I raised an eyebrow, curious, as she handed me a small package wrapped in brown paper. I carefully unwrapped it, revealing a beautifully carved wooden box. It was simple, yet elegant, with intricate patterns etched into the sides. "What's this?" I asked, holding it up to the light. "Open it," she urged, her eyes sparkling. I lifted the lid, and inside, I found a small stack of old photographs. I glanced at Helen, confused. "These are pictures of my husband and me," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "We never had children of our own, but we always dreamed of sharing our lives with someone. I want you to have these, James. They're a part of our legacy, and I believe they're meant for you." I felt a lump form in my throat as I looked at the photos. Helen and her late husband, Arthur, in their younger years, smiling at the camera, their love for each other evident in their eyes. I couldn't believe what she was giving me. It wasn't just a gift, it was a piece of their history, a tangible connection to their lives. "Thank you, Helen," I whispered, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I'll cherish these forever." She smiled, her face softening with emotion. "I know you. Will, you've brought so much light back into my life, James. You've given me more than you'll ever know." That Christmas, as I stood in the small bakery with the woman who had given me a second chance at life, I realized that it wasn't just the house or the key that had changed everything. It was the love and kindness of a stranger who had become a friend. And in that moment, I understood that the greatest gift of all was not something you could hold in your hands, but something you felt in your heart. I had been living in the house on the hill for several months now, and each day felt more like a new beginning. Max and I had found a rhythm here, a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. I spent my mornings working on the house, making small repairs and improvements. The evenings were often spent at Helen's bakery, where I had become a regular, helping her with whatever needed doing. She had always treated me like family, and it was in her company that I had begun to feel truly alive again. As Christmas approached, Pinebrook was covered in snow, the kind of snow that made everything feel still and quiet. The town had a charm about it, a warmth that was hard to find in the big cities. The streets were lined with decorated houses, the lights twinkling like stars in the clear winter sky. Despite the festive atmosphere, I had a quiet sadness that I couldn't shake. This time of year had always been difficult for me. The memories of my time in the military, the loss of friends, the loneliness, it all seemed to weigh heavier during the holidays. But as I stood outside one cold morning, watching the first light of dawn spread over the snow-covered town, I realized something. I wasn't alone anymore. I had Helen, I had Max, and I had this community that had accepted me as one of their own. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I didn't need to carry the burden of the past anymore. I didn't have to be defined by the things I had lost. Helen had given me a chance to start over, and now I was starting to understand what it meant to truly live. One afternoon, I walked into the bakery to find Helen looking over some old papers. She looked up when she saw me and smiled warmly. "I've been thinking, James," she said, folding the papers and setting them aside. "About what?" I asked, sitting down at the counter. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "You've been here for a while now, and I've watched you change. I think it's time you make this place your own." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. Helen leaned forward, her eyes serious. "I want you to take over the bakery, James. I can't run it forever, and I think you've got what it takes. It's time to pass it on to someone who can keep it going, someone who understands what it means to give." Her words hit me like a wave. I had never thought of taking over the bakery, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. This place had become a part of me, just like the house on the hill. I had worked here long enough to see the impact it had on the community. People came not just for the bread and pastries, but for the warmth that Helen gave them. She had a gift, a way of making everyone feel welcome, and I realized I wanted to carry that on. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice low. "I'm sure," Helen replied. You've got the heart for it, James. And I know you'll make it your own. This bakery is more than just a business. It's a part of the town. It's a place where people can come together, share stories, and feel at home. You can do that. I sat there for a long time, thinking. Taking over the bakery wasn't just about running a business. It was about carrying on a legacy, about keeping a place alive that had brought so much joy to the people of Pinebrook. It wasn't something I had planned for, but it felt like the right thing to do. That night, as I sat alone in the quiet of the house on the hill, I thought about all that had happened in the past year. I had gone from being a broken man, lost in the memories of a past I couldn't escape, to someone who had a future that was full of promise, full of new beginnings. The house, the bakery, the people of Pinebrook, they had all given me something that I never thought I'd have again. Hope. The next morning, I walked back to the bakery, a sense of purpose in my step. I was ready to take over, ready to make this place my own, and ready to continue the legacy of kindness and warmth that Helen had built. As I walked through the door, Helen was already there, waiting for me with a smile. Ready to get started? She asked, her voice filled with pride. Absolutely, I said, a smile spreading across my face. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone anymore. And that was all I needed to move forward. I had been working at the bakery for several weeks now, taking on more responsibility as Helen gradually handed over the reins. It was still a little surreal to think about. Just a year ago, I was a man with nothing, struggling to make sense of a life that had been torn apart by war. Now here I was, in a town that had welcomed me, running the very bakery where I had first felt like I was part of something bigger. The customers who came in every day had become like family. There was Mr. Lawson, the elderly man who came in each morning for his cup of coffee and a slice of Helen's famous apple pie. There was Sarah, the young woman who worked at the town's library, always smiling and chatting about the books she was reading. And then there was Mrs. Hamilton, the local teacher, who always had a kind word to say and had a way of making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. The bakery had become the heart of Pinebrook, and I was proud to be a part of it. The days passed quickly, and before I knew it, the first anniversary of my arrival in Pinebrook was approaching. I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. I thought about my first days here, how lost and broken I had felt. I thought about Helen, how she had taken me in when I had nothing and had shown me what kindness and community truly meant. I thought about the house on the hill and how it had become a home in every sense of the word. I never imagined I would find peace, let alone happiness, again. But now, as I stood in the bakery, looking out the window at the snow falling gently outside, I realized that this place had given me everything I needed. A purpose, a future, and most importantly, a sense of belonging. That night, as the bakery closed for the evening, I sat down with Helen at the small table in the back. She was no longer the woman who had simply helped me get by. She had become a mentor, a friend, and in many ways, a mother figure. "You've come a long way, James," she said, her voice full of pride. "I remember when you first arrived, you barely spoke to anyone. Now, look at you, running this bakery, becoming part of the fabric of this town." I smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude well up inside me. "I couldn't have done it without you, Helen. You gave me a chance when I didn't even believe in myself." She reached across the table, placing a hand over mine. "You did the hard part, James. You showed up, you worked hard, and you cared. That's what makes you special." We sat in silence for a moment, the quiet hum of the bakery around us. I realized then that I had found something here that I had never had before. A sense of purpose, a sense of family, and a place where I could finally be at peace with myself. The next day, I decided to take a walk up to the house on the hill. It had been a while since I had spent any time there, and something about the quiet of the place always calmed me. As I walked up the familiar path, I felt a sense of contentment settle over me. The house, though still in need of some repairs, had become a reflection of my own journey. It was a little worn, a little weathered, but it was mine. I unlocked the door with the brass key Helen had given me and stepped inside, the familiar scent of wood and cedar greeting me. The house felt different now. It felt like home. I walked through the rooms, taking in the small changes I had made over the months. The furniture was simple but comfortable. The walls, once bare, were now adorned with a few pictures, photos of me and Max, photos of Pinebrook, and even a few snapshots from the bakery's customers, all of them smiling and laughing. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything to me. As I stood there, looking out the window at the town below, I realized that this was where I was meant to be. Not just in Pinebrook, but in my life. I had found my place, my purpose, and the people who would be with me through it all. Helen had given me more than I could ever repay, but I was determined to honor her gift by living a life worthy of it. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of baking, meeting customers, and continuing to work on the house. Every day felt like a step forward, and with each step, I felt stronger. And then, one cold December evening, as I was closing up the bakery, Helen walked in with a smile on her face. She handed me a small envelope, the edges worn with age. "I found this the other day," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I think it's time you see it." I opened the envelope, and inside was a letter from Helen's late husband, Arthur. The letter was simple, but the words were powerful. "James, I know you've been through much, but I also know you're capable of more than you think. Take care of this place, and take care of yourself. The world needs people like you." I read the letter over and over, the words sinking deep into my soul. It was as if Arthur had known, all those years ago, that I would be the one to carry on the legacy of the bakery. It was a gift I would never take for granted. As I stood there, holding the letter, I realized that I wasn't just carrying on a business. I was carrying on a legacy of kindness, of second chances, and of love. And I was ready to make sure that legacy lived on for years to come. I had been running the bakery for nearly a year now, and life in Pinebrook had become a steady rhythm. Every morning, I'd wake up early to start the bread, the scent of fresh dough filling the air. Max would lay by the fireplace, content as I worked. Over time, the bakery had become more than just a place to bake bread. It had become my lifeline, a way to connect with the people of Pinebrook and feel truly at home. I had found my place, and with each passing day, I was reminded of how far I had come. The town had embraced me, and in return, I had given back in ways I hadn't even expected. It was a symbiotic relationship that felt almost magical. One evening, as I was cleaning up after a busy day, there was a knock at the bakery door. It was late, and I wasn't expecting anyone, but I opened the door to find Mr. Lawson standing there, holding a basket in his hands. "Evening, James," he said with a grin, his silver hair catching the light. "I brought you something." He handed me the basket, and I could see it was filled with fresh eggs and vegetables. "A little something for the bakery," he added, his eyes twinkling. "You've been working so hard. Thought you could use some good ingredients." I smiled, touched by his kindness. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. This will make a huge difference. It's always a pleasure to have fresh, local produce." As I looked at the basket, I realized how much the town had become a part of my life. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about the connections I had formed with these people, the way they trusted me and supported me, just as I had learned to trust and support them. It was in moments like this, in the quiet acts of kindness, that I saw the true value of what I had built. That night, after I closed the bakery, I sat at the counter and thought about everything that had happened over the past year. I had come to Pinebrook broken, a man lost in the memories of war, unsure of where I fit in the world. But now, I had found something I never thought I'd find again: peace. It wasn't just the bakery or the house on the hill that had changed me. It was the people who had welcomed me, the people who had shown me that there was more to life than survival. They had given me the chance to rebuild, and I had taken that chance, slowly but surely. The phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Helen. "James, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice serious. "What's going on?" I asked, concern creeping into my voice. "I've been thinking," she said, "about the bakery and what's next. I think it's time for you to make it your own, really. I know I've been slowly stepping back, but I think you're ready for more than just running things. You're ready to grow, James. This bakery could be something bigger. I want you to think about it." I was quiet for a moment, processing what she was saying. Helen had always been there for me, guiding me every step of the way. But now, it seemed like she was giving me the freedom to make the decisions, to take the next step. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, my voice unsure. "You've got a gift, James," she said. "This bakery isn't just about making bread. It's about bringing people together, about creating something that lasts. I've been thinking about how we could expand, maybe even open a second location. But that will require more than just baking. It'll require vision. And I think you've got that vision." Her words hit me hard. I had always thought of the bakery as something small, something personal, something just for Pinebrook. But now, with Helen's encouragement, I started to imagine what it could be, what it could become. It wasn't just about the bread anymore. It was about the future, about growth. I hadn't considered the possibility of expanding, of reaching more people, of creating a legacy that would last. But maybe that's exactly what I needed. I had spent so much time running from my past that I had forgotten to look forward. I had never allowed myself to dream beyond survival, beyond the day-to-day struggles. But now, with Helen's belief in me, I realized it was time to start thinking bigger. The next few weeks were filled with planning and discussions. Helen helped me sketch out ideas for the bakery's future, and we talked about what it would take to make those dreams a reality. It was exciting and overwhelming at the same time. I had never been good at thinking beyond the immediate, but now I was forced to think about what could come next. I was starting to believe in myself again, and I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. As Christmas approached again, I felt a sense of gratitude and anticipation. I was no longer the broken man who had stumbled into Pinebrook. I was a part of something bigger, something meaningful. And for the first time in years, I looked forward to the future, ready to face whatever came next. I had always been a man of simple routines, never one to dream of expansion or growth. The bakery, with its cozy warmth and the familiar hum of customers coming and going, had been enough. But now, with Helen's encouragement and the quiet drive to make something more of myself, I couldn't help but imagine what the future could hold. The idea of a second bakery was thrilling yet daunting. Pinebrook was small, but it had a sense of community that I had grown to love. I never imagined the town could support 2 locations, but then again, I had never truly thought beyond the walls of this little shop. Still, I wanted to take the leap. I wanted to honor the legacy of kindness that Helen had started here and bring a piece of that to other places. I spent the following weeks planning and strategizing. There were a lot of late nights in the bakery, sketching out ideas and working through the logistics. I knew there were risks involved, financial, personal, and emotional. But I had seen the way the bakery had brought people together. I had seen how it had helped me rebuild my life, and I believed it could do the same for others. One evening, as I sat in the bakery after hours, I looked around. The familiar scent of cinnamon and freshly baked bread filled the air, and the worn wooden counters seemed to hold the memories of so many quiet moments. Helen was sitting across from me, a cup of tea in her hands, watching me as I worked through the numbers. "What do you think?" I asked, looking up. "I think it's a big step, but I know you can do it," she said softly. "You've come so far in the last year, James. And now, it's time to take everything you've learned and share it with the world. You've got what it takes." Her words gave me the final push I needed. I had been doubting myself, wondering if I was ready, if I could really make this work. But Helen believed in me, and for the first time, I realized I believed in myself too. The next day, I went to the local bank to inquire about a loan for the new bakery. I had never been one to take risks, but this was different. This was about creating something that would last. The bank manager, a friendly man named Mr. Thomas, listened carefully as I laid out my plan. He asked a lot of questions, but in the end, he smiled and shook my hand. "I believe in your vision, James," he said. "We'll make it happen." It was a huge step, and one that filled me with a mixture of excitement and fear. But I knew this was the right decision. With the loan secured, I set out to find the perfect location. I knew the new bakery needed to be in a place where people could walk to it, where the sense of community was just as strong as it was in Pinebrook. After weeks of searching, I found the spot, a small building in the center of a neighboring town that had a similar feel to Pinebrook. It was a place where people could gather, where the same warmth and comfort that had been in the first bakery could be recreated. I signed the lease, and construction began soon after. I worked tirelessly with contractors, designing the space to reflect the same charm and warmth of the original bakery. Every detail mattered. I wanted the new location to feel like a natural extension of what I had already built. Meanwhile, life in Pinebrook continued to thrive. The bakery was doing better than ever, and I was finally beginning to feel like I had a real future. I spent less time working alone in the back and more time interacting with the customers. The regulars came in every day, and the new faces were always a welcome sight. I started to see the impact of what I was doing, and it was a feeling I couldn't quite describe. It wasn't just about the bread anymore. It was about making people feel like they mattered, like they were part of something special. About 6 months later, The new bakery was ready to open. The space looked beautiful, just as I had imagined it. Warm, inviting, and full of character. As I stood outside the new bakery on the morning of the grand opening, a sense of pride filled me. I couldn't believe how far I had come. The doors opened, and the familiar smell of freshly baked bread greeted the first customers. They smiled as they entered, just as they had in the original bakery. I was finally able to see my dream come to life. A dream that had started in the small house on the hill, with nothing but a broken man and a loyal dog. Helen stopped by later that morning, her face beaming with pride. "You did it, James," she said, her voice full of emotion. "You've made it happen. This is just the beginning." I smiled, feeling a lump form in my throat. "We did it, Helen," I replied, my voice thick with gratitude. "Without you, none of this would have been possible." She gave me a warm hug, and I knew, in that moment, that this was just the start of something much bigger. I wasn't just building a bakery, I was building a legacy, and I was ready for whatever came next. I stood in the doorway of the new bakery, taking in the sight of the bustling space. It was everything I had hoped for and more. The scent of fresh bread, cinnamon, and coffee filled the air, mingling with the warm chatter of the customers as they made their way through the store. The soft clink of the cash register and the hum of the espresso machine provided the soundtrack to a new chapter in my life. As I watched people enjoy their pastries, chatting with one another and relaxing in the cozy atmosphere, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. This was real. It wasn't just a dream anymore, it was my life. The grand opening had been a success. The community came out in full force to support the new bakery, eager to experience what they had heard so much about. Helen, of course, was there, smiling proudly as she watched me from the corner of the room. It felt like a full-circle moment. A year ago, I had walked into Pinebrook a man with no direction, no sense of purpose. And now, here I was, standing in my second bakery, watching it thrive. The town had embraced me in a way I never thought possible. The people who had once been strangers were now my friends, my customers, my community. I couldn't have asked for anything more. But despite the success of the new bakery, something was still on my mind. I had promised myself that I wouldn't just stop here. I had built something incredible, but there was more I wanted to do. I wanted to continue expanding, to give back to the town that had given me so much. I spent the next few months focused on making the second bakery a success. I worked with my team, fine-tuning the recipes, improving the customer experience, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. But every now and then, I would catch myself looking out the window, wondering what else was out there for me to do. One afternoon, as I was taking a break in the back office, Helen stopped by with a cup of coffee in hand. She set it down in front of me, her eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "You're thinking about something, aren't you?" she asked. I sighed, looking up at her. "I'm happy with everything, Helen. I really am. But I can't shake the feeling that there's more I should be doing." She smiled softly, sitting down across from me. "You're not the kind of man who rests on his laurels, are you?" I shook my head, a smile tugging at my lips. "No, I guess not." "Well," she said, leaning forward, "maybe it's time to think about the bigger picture. You've created something special here. You've proven that you can make it work. But now, what are you going to do with that success?" Her words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about building another bakery or making more money. It was about using what I had built to make a lasting impact. What if I could do more than just run a business? What if I could help others who were struggling the way I once had? What if I could give people like me a second chance, just as Helen had given me? That night, after the bakery had closed, I sat alone in the back office, the quiet hum of the ovens the only sound in the room. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe I could offer jobs to people who were getting back on their feet, those who had been through hard times like I had. Maybe I could start a program to help struggling veterans find work and rebuild their lives, just like I had done. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. I had been given a second chance, and I wanted to share that opportunity with others. The next day, I met with Helen again, my mind made up. "I think I figured it out," I told her. "I want to give back. I want to create something that helps others, just like this bakery helped me." Helen smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I knew you'd get there. You've got the heart for it, James. Now, let's figure out how to make it happen." Over the next few weeks, I worked on creating a plan. I reached out to local organizations, businesses, and veterans groups to see how we could collaborate. We started a job training program at the bakery, offering workshops and employment opportunities for veterans and others who had been struggling. It wasn't just about giving people a paycheck. It was about giving them a chance to rebuild their lives, to find purpose, and to be part of something bigger than themselves. As the program took off, I saw the same transformation in others that I had gone through. People who had been uncertain, unsure of their place in the world, started to find their footing. They found pride in their work, and in turn, they brought that pride into the bakery, making it an even better place to be. I watched as the community grew stronger, as people came together to support one another. The bakery was no longer just a business. It had become a symbol of hope, of second chances, of resilience. I couldn't have been prouder of what we had accomplished. And as I looked around the bakery, filled with the sound of laughter, the clinking of coffee mugs, and the hum of conversation, I knew that this was just the beginning. There was still so much more to do, so many lives to change. And I was ready for whatever came next. I sat in the quiet of my office, looking out at the snow falling gently over Pinebrook. The town had been good to me, and now, with the bakery thriving and the new job training program for veterans well underway, I could feel a deep sense of fulfillment. But even with all the progress, I knew there was still so much more to do. There was something about the stillness of the winter night that made me reflect on how far I had come. A year ago, I had been lost, struggling to find my place in a world that seemed to have no room for me. But now, I had a purpose. I had built something with my own hands, with the support of people like Helen, who had believed in me when I hadn't believed in myself. It wasn't just the bakery that had changed my life. It was the people I had met along the way, the veterans who had walked through our doors seeking a second chance, the families that came to the bakery on weekends to share a meal and laughter, the local farmers who trusted me with their fresh produce. These were the people who had helped me rebuild, and I wanted to do the same for them. I wanted to give back, to make sure that the opportunities one had were available to others. One day, as I was walking down the main street of Pinebrook, I ran into Mr. Lawson, the elderly man who had been a regular at the bakery since day one. He was carrying a small box, his frail hands trembling slightly as he approached. "Good afternoon, James," he said with a smile. "I brought you something." I took the box from him, surprised. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. What is it?" He chuckled softly. "Just a little something from me to you. I've been thinking about how much you've done for this town, how you've helped not just with your bakery, but with the job program for the veterans. You've really made a difference, James, and I wanted to show my appreciation." I opened the box and found a hand-carved wooden sign with the words Pinebrook Bakery etched into it. It was beautiful, a perfect addition to the new bakery. "I don't know what to say," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This means so much to me." Mr. Lawson patted me on the shoulder. "You've earned it, James. You've earned it all." I felt a lump form in my throat as I looked at the sign, the words etched with care, the craftsmanship evident in every line. It was more than just a gift. It was a symbol of everything I had worked for, everything I had built. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. As the months passed, the second bakery continued to thrive. The job program was growing, and more veterans and others from the community had joined the effort, eager to learn and start over. I had seen the transformation in them, just as I had experienced my own transformation. The sense of purpose, of belonging, was something that I could never have imagined when I first arrived in Pinebrook. The town, the people, the bakery, everything had come together in ways that felt almost magical. I began to realize that my work here wasn't just about running a bakery or expanding a business. It was about creating a place where people could find a fresh start, a place where they could find purpose and meaning. It was about giving back to the community that had given me so much. One afternoon, I was sitting at the counter of the bakery, enjoying a quiet moment before the evening rush, when Helen stopped by. She looked at me with a knowing smile. "I think it's time for you to take the next step, James," she said softly. I looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "You've built something incredible here, but you're not done yet," she said, her eyes filled with pride. "You've given so much to this town, to the people who've come through your doors. But there's a bigger picture, James. It's time to think about how you can expand your efforts even more. You have the power to change lives, to help people in ways that go beyond just baking bread." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had been so focused on making the bakery work, on expanding into a second location, that I had forgotten the true purpose behind it all. I wasn't just here to run a business. I was here to make a difference, to create a space where people could rebuild their lives, just as I had. And as I looked around at the bakery, at the people who had become part of my life, I knew she was right. It was time to take the next step. The journey I had started so many months ago was far from over. It was just beginning. With renewed determination, I set out to expand the program even further. I worked with local organizations, government, programs, and businesses to help create even more opportunities for people who had fallen through the cracks. We expanded the job training program, offering support for housing, education, and long-term career development. We worked together to ensure that every person who walked through the bakery doors would leave with a sense of pride and hope for the future. As I saw the faces of those whose lives had been changed, I realized that the true success of the bakery wasn't in the bread we baked or the pastries we served. It was in the lives we touched, in the community we had built together. And as I stood there, surrounded by the people who had become family, I knew that this was exactly where I was meant to be. I stood at the counter, the soft hum of the bakery around me, and looked out the window at Pinebrook's quiet streets. It had been a long road from where I started, a road full of challenges, but also full of hope. I had built something that wasn't just about bread and pastries. It was about changing lives. The bakery had become more than just a business. It had become a place of transformation, a place where people could rebuild themselves, just like I had. The job training program for veterans and others had grown over the past few months. More people had walked through the door, looking for a second chance, and they found it. They found work, they found support, and they found a community that cared. I couldn't have been prouder of what we had accomplished. But as time went on, I realized there was still more work to be done. The program was successful, but it wasn't enough. There were still so many people out there who needed help, people who had fallen through the cracks, people who didn't have the opportunities one had been given. I knew it was time to take the next step. It was time to expand beyond Pinebrook, to take this vision of hope and spread it to other communities. I spent the next few weeks researching, reaching out to other towns and cities, seeing where the need was greatest. It was a daunting task, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was what I was meant to do. Helen had been my rock, guiding me through the ups and downs of the bakery, but even she knew this was the next logical step. "You've built something here, James," she said one afternoon as we sat together at the counter. "You've shown people what's possible. Now, it's time to show the rest of the world." Her words stayed with me long after she left. I spent every waking moment working on the expansion plans, finding funding, setting up meetings with local businesses and governments, and researching other towns that could benefit from the same opportunities we had created in Pinebrook. It was exhausting, but I felt more alive than I ever had. One of the biggest challenges was finding the right people to help run the new bakeries. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I had to find individuals who shared the same values and vision, people who truly cared about the community and the mission behind the bakery. It wasn't about opening as many locations as possible. It was about maintaining the heart and soul of the business, no matter where we went. I was lucky to find a group of people who shared my passion. They were individuals who had experienced their own struggles, who understood the importance of second chances, and who were eager to be a part of something bigger. Together, we set out to open our first new location in a nearby town. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks along the way, delays, financial challenges, and logistical hurdles. But we pushed through, knowing that the impact we were about to make would be worth it. On the day the new bakery opened, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. It wasn't just the ribbon cutting or the crowd that had gathered outside. It was the realization that this was just the beginning. We were changing lives, one person at a time, one loaf of bread at a time. As the months went on, we opened more bakeries in other towns, each one with the same goal: to provide opportunity, to give people a chance to rebuild, to help create a community where everyone could thrive. It wasn't always easy, but the rewards were more than worth it. Every time a new person walked through the door, eager to learn and start over, I was reminded of my own journey. I had been the one who walked in with nothing, and now I was the one offering a hand to help others get back on their feet. I never imagined that a simple decision to open a bakery would turn into something so much bigger than I could have ever dreamed. But here I was, standing in the middle of it, watching people change their lives, watching the community grow stronger with every step we took. As I stood at the counter of the new bakery one evening, watching the customers come and go, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I had built something real. It wasn't perfect, and there would always be challenges ahead, but it was mine. And more importantly, it was something that mattered. The bakery wasn't just a business. It was a place where people could start over, where they could find purpose, and where they could belong. I knew that I wasn't just feeding people with bread. I was feeding their hope, their dreams, and their future. And that was the greatest gift I could give them. I had been thinking about how much things had changed over the past year. From a man wandering through life with no direction, to a business owner, to someone who had begun to build something far bigger than a bakery. The new locations were thriving, and the community was stronger than ever. But there was something deeper stirring within me, a need to do more. I couldn't ignore it. Pinebrook had given me everything. It had given me a purpose, a community, and the chance to rebuild my life. But I wanted to leave something lasting behind, something that could inspire others and continue to change lives long after I was gone. The thought of expanding further had always lingered in the back of my mind, but now it was becoming a reality. I started to think about how I could make an even bigger impact. What if the bakeries could become places of mentorship, where people could come not just for a job, but for guidance, for support, for a chance to break the cycle of struggle they had been in? I knew that with the right support system, we could create a network, a community of people helping each other, building each other up. That's when the idea hit me. Why not partner with local schools, veteran organizations, and community centers to create a larger outreach program? We could offer job placements, skills training, and mentorship, especially for people who had faced the toughest battles in life, those who had been left behind, those who had struggled with addiction or mental health issues, or simply lacked opportunities. As I thought about this vision, I realized it wasn't just about the bakeries anymore. It was about creating a ripple effect in the world, one person at a time. I didn't want to stop at just providing jobs. I wanted to help people build lives, find direction, and contribute to something meaningful. I started reaching out to local organizations, talking to people who could help us bring this idea to life. The response was overwhelming. People were excited, eager to be part of something that went beyond just making bread. They wanted to be a part of a movement that was about healing, giving back, and making a difference. The more I talked to people, the more I realized that the need was far greater than I had initially thought. There were so many people in our community who felt lost, disconnected, or like they had no way out. This program, this mission, could be the lifeline they had been searching for. As the weeks went by, I worked tirelessly to lay the groundwork for this new initiative. We partnered with local schools to offer job shadowing opportunities to young students, teaching them valuable skills not only for the kitchen, but for life. We expanded our outreach to include support groups for veterans, creating safe spaces for them to share their experiences and help each other heal. It wasn't just about training people to bake. It was about training them for life, teaching them to take pride in their work and to believe in themselves. Slowly but surely, the program began to take shape. More and more people walked through the bakery doors, not just looking for a job, but looking for a chance to change. I watched as the lives of those I had hired transformed right before my eyes. There was one young woman, Lisa, who had come to us after struggling with addiction for years. She had been to rehab multiple times, but she couldn't seem to break free. She walked into the bakery, hesitant but determined, unsure if she could truly turn her life around. We gave her a chance, and slowly, over time, she began to change. She found purpose in her work, pride in the little things, baking bread, serving customers, helping others. As the months passed, she blossomed. She got her own place, started working on her personal goals, and eventually became a mentor herself for others who came through the program. Seeing her transformation was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. And Lisa was just one of many. There were dozens of stories like hers. People who had been down on their luck. People who had felt invisible, who now had a chance at a new beginning. One morning, as I was walking through the bakery, I caught sight of the sign that Mr. Lawson had given me. The wooden sign that had hung proudly above the first bakery. Pinebrook Bakery. It was a symbol of everything I had worked for. The journey, the struggle, and the triumph. And now, it stood for something even greater. It stood for the power of second chances, for the community we had built, and for the lives we were continuing to change. I stood there for a moment, looking at that sign, reflecting on how far I had come. I had never imagined that a simple decision to open a bakery would turn into something so much bigger than myself. It wasn't just about the bread anymore. It was about the people, the lives we touched, and the impact we had on the world. And as I thought about what lay ahead, I knew that I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. There was still so much more to do. But I wasn't afraid. Because now, I knew that I wasn't alone in this. I had a community that supported me, and together, we were making a difference. I stood outside the new bakery, watching the sun set over Pinebrook. The air was crisp, and the golden light bathed the street in a warm glow. It had been a long road to get here, and as I looked around at the bustling town, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. A year ago, I was a man lost in the shadows of my past, unsure of what the future held. But now, I had built something more than just a business. I had built a community, a place of second chances, where people could find hope, rebuild their lives, and start over. The bakery had become a symbol of what was possible. When people came together to support each other, and it wasn't just about the bread or pastries anymore. It was about the lives we touched, the stories we shared, and the bonds we formed. I thought about Helen, how she had been there from the very beginning, believing in me when I couldn't even believe in myself. She had been the guiding light, the mentor who had helped me find my way. And now, she was watching from the sidelines, proud of what we had created together. I had learned so much from her, not just about baking, but about kindness, generosity, and the power of community. As I walked into the bakery, I was greeted by familiar faces. The team I had built, the veterans and locals who had become like family, were all busy with their tasks, working together to keep everything running smoothly. It was a beautiful sight. People who had been given a chance, people who had found purpose, working side by side. I moved through the bakery, greeting customers, exchanging stories, and making sure everything was in order. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, the scent of fresh bread and coffee filling the air. This was the life I had worked so hard to build. This was the life I had always dreamed of, but never thought I would have. Later that evening, as the last customers left and the bakery began to quiet down, I sat down at the counter, reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about the people who had walked through the door, unsure of themselves, unsure of their future. And now, many of them had found their way. They had become part of something bigger than themselves, something that mattered. I thought about Lisa, the young woman who had walked into the bakery a year ago, struggling with addiction. She had been one of the first to join our job training program, and over time, I watched her transform. She had gone from being unsure of herself to becoming a mentor for others, helping those who had once been in her shoes. Her journey had been one of the most inspiring things I had witnessed, and it reminded me of the power of second chances. And then there was Max, my loyal dog, who had been with me from the very start. He had been my constant companion through all of this. As I sat there, I realized how much he had helped me, just by being there. He had never judged me for my past. He had simply been there, offering his unconditional support. I smiled as Max trotted over, nudging me with his nose. I patted him gently, feeling the warmth of his presence. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. "We did it, boy," I whispered, knowing that he understood. We had both come a long way. I had been given a second chance, and I had used it to build something meaningful, something that would leave a legacy behind. As I looked out the window, I saw the lights of Pinebrook twinkling in the distance. The town had changed me, had given me the opportunity to change myself. And now, I was in a position to help others do the same. I thought about the future. There was so much more to do, so many more lives to change. The bakery had become just the beginning. I wanted to continue expanding the program, to offer more opportunities to those who needed it most. I wanted to create a network of second chances, a community of people who could support each other and build something better together. And while I didn't know exactly what the future held, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone in this journey. I had a team, I had a community, and most importantly, I had a purpose. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out over the town that had given me everything. It was a moment of peace, of contentment, knowing that the work we had done together had made a real difference. I wasn't the same man who had walked into Pinebrook all those months ago. I was someone who had found a place, a purpose, and a future. And as the stars began to appear in the night sky, I realized that this was only the beginning. There was still so much more to come, and I was ready for whatever came next. Veteran stories have the power to inspire and transform lives, And this particular journey takes you through the heartwarming story of a man who started with nothing but a past filled with struggles and a loyal dog by his side. From his arrival in a small town to finding hope and purpose through hard work, this journey highlights the incredible impact of second chances. As a veteran, the protagonist learns the true value of community, mentorship, and perseverance. Through veteran stories, we see how powerful it is to rebuild not just a career, but a life. Along the way, he not only reopens doors for himself, but helps others, particularly veterans, by offering them opportunities for a fresh start through a job training program. The bakery becomes a symbol of transformation, creating a ripple effect where veterans and others in the community find a sense of belonging and purpose. The program's success leads to expanded efforts, with more towns offering a chance for people to begin anew. These veteran stories unfold with each individual who walks through the bakery doors, learning new skills, building self-confidence, and making lasting contributions. Through dedication and community support, the protagonist's journey shows that veterans, like many others, deserve a chance to find their place in the world, and in doing so, they continue to inspire with their resilience. The impact of these veteran stories goes beyond bread and pastries. It's about changing lives and creating a legacy of kindness and opportunity for those who need it the most.